The topic is data entry. We'll cover starting with patient data entry along with consents information, how you can enter samples in a longitudinal study versus general biobanking collection. And additionally, if you want to collect any other annotations like clinical annotations, pathology annotations, how can you do that per study basis? So we'll cover some of these topics. We'll be recording this session. So we'll be posting the recording after the call. So please keep your phone lines on mute, and you can use the chat window for any questions you have. And we'll look at the questions after the webinar today. Okay, let's get started then. So OpenSpecimen allows you to track everything about the specimen. So starting from collection of the specimen from the patient, everything about the patient, and how was it collected, where was it collected, and the lab processing details, how was it processed, where was it stored, and finally, if the specimen is given to researcher, where was it given. So kind of the whole life cycle of the specimen is tracked. So today's session will mostly concentrate on collection and storage of the specimen. We will be covering distribution of specimens in the future topics. So first of all, who can do the data entry, like adding patients, adding specimens? So we look at who can do that. So if you recall from our user webinar, there are multiple roles in OpenSpecimen, and each of these roles can do different things. So let us take the most commonly used role, which is the tissue banker. So this is a user who cannot do any administrative tasks, that is creation of studies, creation of freezers, but they will be able to collect data for the specimen. So that includes any patient data, including PHI, that is the identified information, as well as collecting visits and specimen. So this is a new enhancement in 7.0 that the visits and specimens resources is separated now. So you can control who can added it visits versus added it specimens. Previously it was combined. But in any case, if you have to do data entry, these are the three important resources, that is specimens, participants, and visits. You need to have read access to collection protocol and storage container. So if you see here, because you're going to do data entry within a collection protocol, so you need to have read access to that, and storage container read if you want to store the specimen. So if you use the default tissue banker role, you need not worry about setting up all of this. So by default, a tissue banker can do any data entry. But if there are users in your biobank who are just going to do specimen processing and data entry, they'll not be entering patient data, and you don't want them to enter patient identified data, then you give them access as technician. If you see here, they get access as participant de-identified access, which means they cannot see or add in patient identified information. So these are the different roles you can give for doing data entry. So that's about, as I said, clinicians, tissue bankers, and technicians are the default roles who can do data entry. Now, once you have created a user account, and now they have to start entering data. So where do they start? So let's go back to the home screen here. So everything in OpenSpecimen, that is adding patients and specimens, are within collection protocol. So collection protocol, if you had attended the last session, it is a study where you can collect samples, based on longitudinal clinical trial, or it might be for general biobanking purpose. So you might have multiple studies within your group or within your institute. So for that, you'll create a corresponding collection protocol. Every user has access to one or more collection protocols. So when they log in, go to the home page and access the collection protocols page, they'll see list of all the protocols that they can access. So right now I have logged in as an admin, so I see create option here, which is creating a collection protocol itself. But if I log in as a tissue banker or technician, I'll not see create option, but I'll see the studies. And how do I now navigate to do data entry? So you have two options. Either you can directly click on the protocol title here, or you see that there is links to access the list of participants and specimens. So you can either click on one of these here. So we'll go ahead and click on the participants list here. So the first, training we'll do is for a data entry within a demo longitudinal study. So which means that it has, it's a, first of all, it's a patient-centric study. That means you're going to collect patient data, whether identified or non-identified, at least even if you're collecting a subject ID, it's a patient-centric study. But OpenSpecimen also allows you to collect specimens under a specimen-centric study, which means there is no patient data involved. So we'll see in the future slides how you will be able to do data entry in such studies. So now we'll go ahead. So we saw how to navigate within a study into participant list or specimen list. Now we'll start the topic of participants. So before you add in specimens, especially if it's a patient-centric study or a participant-centric study, you need to add a participant. So now this participant, you have two options. One is you enter it manually into OpenSpecimen, or if you have this data in another application, for example, it might be Epic, which is a patient registry, or it might be RedCap, OpenClinica, which are EDC systems. So you have an option to pull data from there so that you don't do duplicate data entry into OpenSpecimen. So you have both options. A lot of our clients have integrated with these applications. So we have helped them to build plugins so that they can pull data directly about the patient into OpenSpecimen. If you don't have that in place, you go ahead and click on this add participant. Then you get a screen like this. So these are the default demographic details of a participant that you can capture in OpenSpecimen. But any screen going forward, you're going to see they're all configurable. What means that for study, you can configure what fields you want to capture, how you want to arrange them in your data entry screens, and if you want to add any additional fields. For example, if you see in the screen, there is no field for capturing address of the patient, phone number of the patient, or maybe marital status. So those fields are not there, but there is a module called custom forms where you can add new fields to the database and you can capture that within the study so that you can add within the patient. So now we'll go ahead and add a new patient here. So I'll just add demo webinar patient. And so as you see, none of these fields in patient is mandatory. So that means only two fields which are mandatory when you're registering patient is, the first is the registration date and the other is the patient ID. So in this study, the patient ID is auto-generated. I'll show you what that means. But if it is not auto-generated, then you need to manually enter it. Okay. So I'll just enter some details here. And all of these drop-down values are also configurable. So by default, there are some values, but you can always configure these values. So, and I can add in any MRN I want and register the patient. As of now, I'll not click on proceed to collection. This allows me to directly go to the specimen collection screen. But as of now, I'll just add a new patient. So this is how you will manually enter a patient details into OpenSpecimen. So if you see here, a patient got registered. So whenever you add a data into OpenSpecimen, this is a typical, workflow or a screen that comes up. That is, it shows up with the overview of what you added. And on left-hand side, you see things, tabs like this, which allows you to go into more details about that particular data. So this, since this is patient, I can navigate to consents, visits about the patient, specimens about the patient. So this whole screen is corresponding to one patient, which is our demo webinar patient. So once I add the patient, suppose I did some mistake and can go back to edit and change details if I want. Right now, I'll not do that. So, and once I add in, so if you see here, there is something called as pending visit section. So this section is populated based on what I've defined in my study. So in my study setup, I have defined that every patient that gets registered to this longitudinal study, I plan to collect samples under these particular time points. That is pre-surgical on day 1, surgery might happen after 30 days, 45 days, post-surgery event, follow-up, and things like that. So this is based on what you have defined in your protocol. It comes up. And based on this, you can also generate reports saying that give me all patients who are expected for pre-surgical, collection in next week. So those kind of things you can do. So that is adding patients with the identified data. Now the next step is, again, this is an optional step. If you're doing consent data collection in a different software, then you need not do it in OpenSpecimen. But if you're doing it on OpenSpecimen, and if you have configured your study to collect consent data, then the consent information can be captured in this tab. So there's the second tab. So when you go inside that, you have two sections here. One is you can upload a signed consent form. If you have like a scanned PDF, you can upload that. And below here is the section where you can add the responses of the patient. Suppose you have set up consent statement like this. Sorry, I'll just say yes to everything here. So you can add in consents like this. So how this would be helpful is later on you can do reporting based on this consent data. You can add signature date, comments, consent witness, and so on. So this is very basic feature of consents, but in the recent version, we have also come up with e-consent module, which is more, robust. It has, features where you can do consent form versioning. You can design very good looking consent forms using HTML formatting. You can do e-signature, patient mode consent data, and things like that. We'll cover e-consent in a different day, but this is the basic consent that you can capture within a patient screen. So we did now two steps. One is patient registration. The second step was consents. So now we'll see how to enter any additional data about the patient. So in OpenSpecimen, we call that as custom form. So for example, you want to capture clinical data for say smoking history of the patient, family history, genetic history, and things like that. What you see here, these are not there in OpenSpecimen. These are custom forms that someone has created to capture additional data. So again, this is an optional step. If you have additional data that you want to capture, you can use a custom forms module to build these using the interface. So suppose now I go into smoking history and I add a new form data. So what type of tobacco, cigarettes, 3 packs per day, when did I start, when did I end it? If I want, I can enter that and save this. So this is how you enter custom form data. And also, if you see here, when you're doing custom form data, you can do save and next, which means suppose you have many custom forms you are adding data for, you can do one after other. And this order of these forms, again, depends on how you have defined in your study. So once you have done entering the data, if you see here, for the ones that have not entered, they're in orange. The ones which are entered in green. And you can edit, you can delete. If there are multi-records, suppose you want to add smoking history. Suppose a patient, smoked for 3 years and again restarted after, 5th year. So you can add many records using this add another. So those are the patient related data, that is patient demographics. These are the default fields of OpenSpecimen, consents data, and then the forms data, that is the clinical data if you have. Again, the clinical data can also be pulled from other systems. Suppose you already have this data in REDCap, then you can pull that using integration plugins. So that's the that's another advantage. You can use plugins to pull data from outside software systems and things like that. So the other feature of participant registration is if you try to enter a duplicate participant, and when I say duplicate, it is based on very specific fields. It is based on MRN, SSN, or any national identifier, MPI, and combination of last name and birth date. So if you enter a patient, and if that data, if there is another patient with the same data, it prompts you with duplicate participant prompt. So let me just show you how that looks like. So I'll try to add a patient with say some Okay, so I'll use this, and I'll use this MRN, and rest of it I'll just enter something for now. So none of these fields are considered for duplicate match, because it's very there might be multiple matches. It's very specific fields. As I said, it's last name, birth date, SSN or national identification number, or the MRN. So now if I try to add the participant, the system says there's a matching found. So if there are no matching found, it registers it immediately. If it is matching, then it shows up like this. I have an option to select one of these and say, okay, use this selected patient rather than creating another new patient. Or I can go back there, edit the patient details. So this is how a duplicate match is shown. So I'll go back to our slides here. So the next, so we already talked about pulling data from external sources. This is to integration plugins through from RedCap or any other systems. The another feature of OpenSpecimen participant data is anonymizing the patient data. So if I go into this patient, for example, there are patient identified informations in this page, that is first name, last name, MPI. But for some reason, maybe this patient withdrew consents and you want to anonymize, you can just come here and click on this button, and it will ask you to, if you want to erase all PHI data, then you can do yes, and it will, if you see that these are all blanked out. So this is just an easier way to remove PHI data. Of course, you can just go to edit and blank out if you want, but there is just this option so that it not only removes the patient demographic data, which is identified data, but also things like if you have uploaded a signed consent form, or if you have surgical pathology number. So these are all considered as identified information. Even custom fields, if you're marked as identified, those would be blanked out. So, and if you don't want this feature, because you're scared that people might, click that button and erase a lot of data, you can also disable this using the settings. You can disable this feature. The next feature of participants is, again, this is a new feature. When you go to participant list view, now there are checkboxes here, so which allows you to do operations on multiple patients at a time. Suppose I select some 3 or 4 patients, three buttons come up. We'll talk about email survey later. So this is part of that e-consent module I said, where you can email forms to be filled up offline. But as of now, we'll concentrate on these two fields, these two operations. So I can select multiple patients from the list view and edit or delete them. So if I say edit, so I can select which field I want to edit. There are very specific fields, because these are like the fields which might be have common values across certain patients. So I want to change them all to male. I want to change them all to alive patients. So this way I can edit data for multiple patients at a time. So this is a new feature that got added. So that is the bulk operations on patient. So we saw that you can edit or delete the patients. The next feature of participant is registering into another protocol. So so you might have use case where, say, this demo patient, for example, is currently registered to demo longitudinal study, but later on they might come back and you might register them to another protocol or another study. So for that, you have two options. One is you go inside the participant screen and click on this add to another protocol. So as long as you have access to another protocol where you want to register to, you can just select that protocol and register. So if the PPID is not auto-generated, then you can enter the PPID here and add the participant. So what this will do is, this will register the same patient to another study. So if you see here, the other registered protocol. So right now this patient 2 is registered to demo longitudinal study as well as ADC umbrella CP. So they are registered to 2 protocols right now. So let me go back to my demo longitudinal study here. So I can switch between these two protocol view by just clicking here. It will show the same participant in different protocols. This is one option. The other option to register the same patient to multiple protocols is, of course, using the duplicate participant match. Because suppose you try to enter the same details in another protocol, it will now tell you that it's a duplicate. Then you reuse the existing patient and register that. So that is another way of doing that. Okay, so that's the register into another protocol. So these were all the features of the participant. So I'll just forgot to tell one more thing. So when you add participants, it keeps getting added in this list. So it shows the count here, how many patients are registered to this protocol. You can search the patients by using different fields on the right hand side here. By default, it shows 100. You can just see 200 or 500. And the other part is this list view that you see is configurable. Again, that's done through JSON configuration. We'll cover that in another session. But just to give you an idea, the fields that you see in this list view, as well as the fields that you see in the participant registration screen, they're all configurable. So you can add new fields, remove fields, you can rearrange the order of the fields, rename the fields. So all this are possible, which we'll all cover in the screen configuration session. Okay, so that's how you register new patient. So now we'll move to visits. So within a study, when you're collecting samples, it is in this hierarchy. That is, you start with patient. One patient can have multiple visits or time points when they visit the hospital for collection. And every visit can have multiple primary specimens, and every specimen can have multiple child specimens. So this is how the hierarchy is. So now we'll see how you can add visits. So we'll go back to our demo patient that we just added. So we'll go to this demo webinar patient. And as I said, these are all the visits that are pre-populated based on how you've defined in your study. This is a longitudinal study, so there are multiple time points. But if there are general biobanking or unplanned protocols, you won't have multiple time points. You might have just one unplanned collections under which you will collect samples. We'll look at that as well. So now we'll go ahead and collect samples. So now when you want to collect specimens, there are again two options. You can either first collect visit data and then go to specimens, collect specimens, or you can directly go into specimens if you're not collecting a lot of visit related data. So you have both this option, but right now we'll go into adding a new visit. So these are again default fields of OpenSpecimen. There is status, which means did you complete the visit collection? There is visit date. Uh, when was the patient visiting the hospital? From which hospital did you collect? This is defaulted again based on what you have defaulted in your study, but you can change it from here. And suppose I change it here. And you can set up diagnosis. Again, you can default it, or you can add one or more diagnosis for the patient for this visit. These diagnoses are by default based on ICD-10 coding, but again, you can configure to change values to this. Suppose I type breast, so it comes up with, related to that. So I can specify that. Clinical status, just to say whether it is operative, or new diagnosis or things like that. Again, these values can be configured. If you plan to upload surgical pathology reports, you can enter surgical pathology number, or you can, of course, you can just enter it if you want, uh, just to enter like this for information, some free text comments. Then you can create this visit. So now what step I did is I have just created a visit with all the data that you see here. And this is adding the visit per time point. So you have another optional step, adding more data to the visit. First is you can upload surgical pathology report. Again, you can use this feature only if it is turned on as the setting in the study. If you want, you can turn it off. If you don't plan to upload surgical pathology reports, you can turn it off in the study, and this tab will not be visible in the visit. So again, I can choose a file and I can upload a surgical pathology report. Let me see if I have any That's fine. So if you upload a surgical pathology report, then you'll be able to see a text data here, and you'll be able to refer to it. You can download the report whenever you need. So that's one another additional information that you can capture. Like how you entered clinical data, that is the forms data at the patient level. If you have any additional forms that you want to collect at the visit level, then you can capture it under forms tab here. So if you see, there are a lot of pathology information that is captured here. Suppose I want to enter best pathology annotation, I can enter and add these details I want. Again, these data is not in OpenSpecimen. This is someone has created a form for entering, the details about the pathology annotation. So this way you can add any fields that is corresponding to visit. For example, you want to capture data about how you collected the specimen in that visit. For example, was it a fasting specimen? Was it, maybe something related to the visit? If you want, you can add additional fields and capture it under the forms. So this is how you add a visit and capture additional data about the visit. That is, so this is the visit overview. This is the pathology report if you have uploaded, and this is the forms view. So as I mentioned before, this is the general layout of OpenSpecimen. Whenever you add data, this is the overview page, which is you can access using this eye icon, and you get additional tabs to add more data for that particular data. Okay. So now we have added the visits with additional data. If you want to repeat a visit, you can go back to the patient overview. So if there is another pre-surgical visit, you can just click here and add a new visit. So this will add one more pre-surgical visit. Suppose, the patient has to give 2 blood samples and 1 urine sample. So they were not able to do it in one day. So if you want to add that as 2 different visits, you can do it, or you can come back and add the specimens under the same visit. Again, it's all left to you how you want to capture the data. Okay, so that's the repeat visit. Now we'll move to adding the specimens part. So we added patient, we added visits. Now we'll go and add the specimens. Okay, so just to clarify, I'm just going through the default workflow, that is adding patient data, visits, and specimens step by step. But all these are configurable based on your study workflow. Suppose you are not collecting patient information, you're just collecting just subject ID and directly collecting specimens. As I mentioned, as soon as you register a patient, you can go to the collect specimen option, and you can collect the specimen, or you can go inside the visit. If you see here, these are all the defaulted specimens based on what you have defined in the study. So now I can select these and collect the specimens. And these are pre-labels that were generated because I have set the settings in the study. So I'll also show you an example where these pre-labels are not auto-generated. So this is my general collection screen. So where I'm going to collect my specimens. So I can collect data about, so if you see here, there are some default fields about visit you can collect here. So you need not go to the add visit step. You can directly come here if you don't collect much details about the visit. So I'm going to say who's the collector, who is the receiver in the lab, what is the date and time which was collected. Maybe I'll put 21, but this says 22. What is the quality, and then if you want any capture additional barcodes. So in OpenSpecimen, every specimen can have 2 identifier. One is the label field, which can be auto generated by OpenSpecimen, or you can enter it. It can have an additional barcode as well. So I'll just add this to show you how that looks like. And to add multiple barcodes for the aliquots, so I can just put comma separated. So right now I'm typing it, but in real time, you can scan the barcodes as well. So this is how you enter the barcodes. And all these quantities are pre-populated based on what I've defined in my study. But if there are deviations, suppose I collected only 8 ml, so I can change that here. The other deviation might be you made lesser number of aliquots. You can change the number of aliquots from here. I can say I made only 3 aliquots, so it will change it from here. And if you see here, the containers are also auto-populated. That is where you want to store the specimens are prompted by the system saying this is the next available slot for you to store. And if you see here, the plasmas are stored in plasma box, serums are stored in serum box, urine are stored in urine box. So all these kinds of configurations can be done in your freezers and protocols. Okay. So what I've done before I enter data, I have created my freezers, and at each rack level and box level, I have configured saying that, certain boxes or racks can hold certain specific type of, kind of specimens. And so based on that, the system knows where is the next best slot to store the specimen. So there are multiple strategies or, settings that you can do how the system should auto allocate the container location. Okay. So this is how it auto allocates. Suppose you didn't like those, auto allocated position. You have this option to manually allocate. You can either, first clear out the positions and manually enter it, or if you want to just change for a couple of aliquots, you just say manual allocation. And the other thing to note here is the aliquot sections are always collapsed. The reason being, whatever changes you do here, that is, if you change the quantity or you change the box name, it will, apply the same change for all the aliquot. If you see here, all of them now became 0.5. Okay, but if you want to make changes to specific aliquots, then you need to expand that section and make changes in that particular locations that way. And now if I want to make changes to this location, again, I'll just collapse and remove this, and I'll choose from here. I want to put it in a different box maybe. So I can, here it will show me all the available freezers. I can just choose from whatever freezer I want. Suppose I want to put it under this demo freezer, and I choose, say, maybe box 1. I want to put it in this location. So note that there were 5 aliquots. Suppose I choose this first position in the 3rd row and say done. Now, if you expand this, the other slots are empty. You need not fill that. After submit, it will take location as 32, 33, 34, 35. So you just have to select for the first aliquot, and it will store the subsequent aliquots in the next locations. So again, for storing specimens, you have multiple options. One is the system can auto allocate based on how you have set up your freezers, or you can choose it from here, or you can choose from this drop down, which will allow you to choose, or you can also type the box name and it will come up with the specific box name as well. So there are multiple, again, choices you have. You can, based on your workflow, you can enter the storage location part of it. So there is a question in the chat window that if there are, if you scan 6 aliquots under the barcode field, will it, designate, will the number of pre-designated aliquot change from 5 to 6? Yes, it can do that as well. So suppose now I'll add one more barcode here and say done. It will automatically change it to 6. So you have that option as well. So you can change the number of aliquots either from here, or you can type or scan as many barcodes as you want, and it will change the number of aliquots based on that. Okay. So, and the other things in this screen is you can print labels. That is, if you've integrated with your printer, and which labels to print can also be auto checked. So again, this is based on my protocol setting. I know that when I collect my specimens, I'm always going to print my aliquot labels. So I have set my protocol saying that this should be pre-checked, but if I don't want to print, I can uncheck it if I want. So this is all the things that you can do. And this is the default collection page. Now when I submit, so it goes to another screen. Oops, does not, okay. I have configured supplies in this, so I'll not enter barcodes for now. So I'll go ahead and submit. Oh. Okay, give me a minute, sorry. We come back to the screen. Okay, and go ahead and submit. So now once I collect the specimen, if you want to add additional details, for example, for this study, I want to capture the centrifugation details about the primary whole blood samples and the freeze date and time of all the aliquots. So this is a screen that is optional and something you can configure per study basis. So, and the data that you want to collect, that is the additional data about the specimens, they can be in sections and they can be based on type, they can be based on different properties of the specimen. This page is configurable per study. Again, we'll cover this in the JSON session, but just to give you an idea that other than the default collection page, the default fields that you saw like date, quantity, and storage location, additionally, if you want to add any data, you can configure such fields like this. Now you go ahead and submit it. So you'll see that the specimens get collected. So if you see the aliquots are collected, and if you see here, the labels are also auto generated. Okay, and let me just show you what settings were done in my protocol. So if I go to my protocol settings, yeah, so if you see here, there is this all these details are set up. That is, I want barcoding, that's why the barcode field was enabled. Otherwise only the label field is visible. And if you want to close the parent, that is, the parent is discarded after you collect the specimen, you can enable this. And all the labels were auto generated, so I have specified the tokens here, but you can remove that if you want to enter the labels manually. So these are some of the settings and how you can collect the plant specimens as such. So we saw collecting plant specimen and how to handle deviations, as in you're not collecting certain specimens. And so if I go back to my collection screen here, so suppose you didn't collect, you collected only tumor tissue and not the normal tissue, then you just don't select that and collect the other specimen. That is one option. Or in the collection screen, you can reduce, increase the number of aliquots you have, and you can add those specimens based on that. So that is the handling the deviations. So you in your study, you might have defined 2 whole bloods, 5 serum, 5 plasma samples, 5 urine aliquots, but per patient it might always differ. So all those can be captured per patient basis. So now we saw how we can add plant specimens based on what you have defined in your protocol. Now let's see how to collect unplanned specimens. So for that, I'll use a different protocol, because I want to also show you an example of longitudinal study, because you might have general biobanking collections where you might not know in advance what you plan to collect. So for that kind of collections, what you can do is in your study, here if you see in my events, I don't have any time points. I just have one event with no requirements. So because I don't know in advance what I plan to collect. So if you have unplanned study, it is mandatory that at least you have one time point. You can just name it as unplanned collection or specimen collection. Now, if I go to participant, I'll just quickly add a new participant here. So this is the default collection screen. So I'll add a participant. So now if you see, the collection is visible and you have the specimen page. And when I collect specimen, this is the visit. Now, if I go to proceed to collection, so you have this collect unplanned specimen option here. This is how you collect unplanned specimen. That is, you go to the patient screen and under collection visit, you click on this three dots and you click on collect unplanned specimen. So the difference between planned and unplanned is planned is something that you have defined in your protocol. So you know what you're collecting, so everything is defaulted. Whereas unplanned, as and when you collect per patient, you enter that sample. So the disadvantage here is you need to enter the details for all the properties of the specimen, like what type of specimen is it. Suppose you collected a blood sample, how much quantity did you collect, when did you create. So the mandatory fields are marked as mandatory, so you need to specify some of the other value under that. So I can say not specified for most of these fields. And you can put who's the collector, receiver. So these are all the same fields that you saw in the planned collection page. And you can add additional fields as well. So this is the custom fields. If you want, you can make aliquots out of it. Suppose you made plasma aliquots, you can add that as well. And you can add as many aliquots as you want. Suppose you made puffy coat as well, you can do that. Suppose you're collecting 2 tubes of whole blood which have the same properties, then you can just say 2 here and it will copy everything based on that. Or if you're adding another sample, that is maybe you're collecting another saliva sample, you can add another and add that as well. So I'll just add those. Okay, so here if you see, you have copy last with aliquots. So when you're adding unplanned specimen, you have multiple options. One is you can collect multiple samples at a time. If you see here, I'm collecting 2 whole blood samples with its aliquot and saliva. And you can, make copies of the same specimens and create. So this is like I'm collecting under same visit for this patient, all these specimens. Now I go to the next screen where I can store the specimen. So this is very similar to the planned specimen page we saw. I can add in the labels here. So here, if you see, the labels are not auto-generated. So I'm going to add as unplanned 1 and unplanned 2. So this is Buffy code unplanned. So as of now, I'll just delete these aliquots. I don't want to enter the labels. Okay, so I added these details. If I want, I can store these in some box and go ahead and collect it. So this is how you do unplanned collection. So, so if you now see, I could add and collect multiple specimens at a time, and either you can auto-generate labels like this, or you can enter the labels that you want. So what I did was, I registered the patient and directly collected unplanned specimens under it using this collect unplanned specimen option. So this is how you can collect unplanned specimen. Now we'll see how you can collect specimen-centric collections. So till now what we saw was collecting specimens under patient-centric longitudinal study, collecting specimens under unplanned patient-centric study. Now we'll go into specimen-centric study. If you see here on the main page itself, you can differentiate between them. It doesn't show the patient count because it only has specimen-related data. So this option is available when you're creating the study. So I'll just quickly show you that actually. When you're creating the study, you have this option of creating either participant-centric or specimen-centric. So usually specimen-centric studies are useful, if you're just collecting cell lines or maybe bacterial isolates, where you're not bothered about the patient data. So you can just create them as specimen-centric. And now when you go to the specimens list, you have this option of adding new specimen. you can go ahead and add the specimen. So if you see here, these fields are not in OpenSpecimen. This is a very specific study that we have designed for bacterial isolate. So that's why you see different types of fields here. But I'll show you another example where we can collect cell lines. So this is just, I'm showing you different screens, how it looks like, within one instance of OpenSpecimen, every study can look different because you might be collecting samples for cell lines, you might be collecting for bacterial isolates, or might be for some clinical study. So every workflow is different. So every screen is different. So this is a specimen-centric study for cell line. So all these are very basic fields of OpenSpecimen. If you see here, there are some custom fields in between, which is specific to cell line. So, and rest of the fields are very, similar to the unplanned study collection. So this is how you can collect cell lines along with their aliquots. If you want, you can collect. So that's an example of specimen-centric study. So the difference is, in a patient-centric study, you collect patient data, and within patient, you can collect multiple visits and specimens. But for a specimen-centric study, you directly collect specimens and its aliquots. So this is the difference. Now, once you have collected the specimens data, you can add additional data. So let's go back to our patient for this. So we'll just go into one of this Donald Duck patient. So now if I go into one of these specimen, you see that there are multiple events that got created. For every specimen, by default, for a primary specimen, there is a collection event and receipt event added to tell you when was it collected, when was it received. So these get added automatically. And if you create aliquots or child samples, a processing event gets added. But the other events like spun event, frozen event, you can either configure the specimen collection page to add these events for the specimens that you're collecting, or there are multiple other events like, you have these QA/QC events like molecular review, cell review, tissue review, and things like that. So these kind of events can be captured. The data either can be added by going into the specimen and adding by clicking on this events tab, or you can also use bulk import. So there is, in OpenSpecimen, you can import data in bulk. Like suppose you want to add this event for 100 DNA specimens, then you can do it through Excel sheets. We'll cover bulk import in another session, but just to give you an idea that events data can be added to capture what happened to a specimen at each time point. When was it collected? When was it received? When was it frozen? When was it processed? When was it thawed? So you can add multiple events like this. The advantage of adding events is you get a log like this, which gives you like an overall overview of what happened to the specimen. Of course, if you don't want to add it as an event, there is the forms feature. You can use this to add any additional annotations about the specimen. For example, biomarkers. These fields are not in OpenSpecimen. Someone has created it to capture biomarkers or data on this specimen. So you can add details like this. You can upload a file, whatever. So these forms are added using the custom forms module. You can add this data per specimen in OpenSpecimen. So again, if you see here, the specimen has the similar layout. So these are the basic fields of OpenSpecimen that you can capture for each sample. And on the left-hand side, you have tab where you can access forms, you can access events. So these are additional details that you can capture. The forms and events, you can add these using the custom forms module. That is, you can add new forms using custom forms module. Okay, and the default fields again that you see, they can be hidden. Some fields, if you don't want, for example, you're collecting only fluid specimens, you don't want anatomic site, laterality, and things like that, you can hide them, or you can add new fields if you want. If you like using custom fields feature. So again, all these we'll be covering in JSON configuration if you want to do screen changes. Okay. So this is how you can add patients, visits, specimens, and all data related to them. So there is a question whether specimen-centric samples can be upgraded to patient-centric. No, so that is a limitation because especially changing from patient-centric to specimen-centric, what will we do with the patient data? You'll lose it. Again, it's not possible. So you'll have to decide during creation of the study if you want it to be specimen-centric or patient-centric. So there is another question, what is the best way to enter multiple aliquots of different quantities? That depends whether it is planned or unplanned. If it is planned aliquots, so if I go into the, the protocol definition, so here if you see, there are some plasma aliquots of 1 ml each. Suppose there were, you plan to also make some aliquots of 0.5. So you can either define it in the protocol itself like this, which means you are collecting two different types of aliquots. So now if I try to collect aliquots for that, let me just show you that screen, how it looks like. Oh, this is already collected. Let me go into another patient. Let me just create another visit. So I'll repeat this visit to show you how the collection looks like. So if you're collecting aliquots of different quantities, if you see here, it is not collapsed because there are different quantities here. So if you see, you can either do this, you can add more aliquots here, and you can collect multiple aliquots of different quantities. Or if you are planning to make unplanned specimens and collecting specimens of different quantities, you can, when you're creating aliquots here, you can do this. Suppose I want plasma of 2 of 0.5, you can do that. But I want another plasma of 2 of 0.3. So you can do this way as well. So based on whether you're doing planned collection or unplanned collection, you can, you can add a different aliquots of different quantity. So that is how you can collect additional data of specimens that we saw. We'll just see bulk action on specimens. That is just the last topic for today. So when you go to view specimens, so this is the specimens list view within the protocol. Again, this screen can be configured if you want a different set of fields. So here, if you see, you can select multiple specimens and you have this actions menu here, from which you can do multiple specimens edit, you can do delete, you can distribute, aliquot, whatever you want. So this is how you can do multiple actions. Actions on multiple specimens. And this actions button is there in multiple places. It's there in cart view, it is there in reporting, it's there in container specimens list view. And even when you go into a participant, and if you are on the visit overview page, so if you're on this page, again, when you select the specimens, you have this actions menu and you can do multiple things on it. So this way you can do, if you want to perform multiple actions, you can do that. Finally, we'll see how to delete the data. So when you are in a participant screen, there is this delete option. If you click on that, it warns you that there is already a visit collected, you want to delete it. Please note that when you're deleting a patient, if it has visits and specimens, everything is deleted. So if you see here, this patient along with all dependent data, that is if you have consents, specimens, forms, everything will be deleted. So please make sure you are aware of that. and you have to give a reason why you are deleting it. Deleting because patient withdrew consent maybe, and you can say yes. So this will delete everything, that is the patient, specimens along with it. Okay. So that's how you delete a patient. But if you want to delete just the specimen, you can go inside the specimen and you have this delete option. Of course, if you deleting a parent specimen, and if it has child, again it is the same. If you see the warning here, it deletes along with all the child specimens. So be careful when you're deleting it. So that's about it. So these were the different topics of just one last thing. When you're in a specimen, when you select, you have two options. One is delete and one is close. So delete means you're removing all data in the system about that specimen, or you won't be able to access that using the interface anymore. So that is two things. When maybe you added that specimen by mistake, you want to delete, you can use that. Or if the patient has withdrawn consent, you don't want to keep that data, you can delete. The other option is to close specimens. The close option is when you discarded the specimen, or maybe the tube fell from your hand and it got, it's the specimen is no more available. So you can add a reason and close it. So what happens to the specimen when you close it? So if you see here, the storage location gets removed, and if you see the specimen is no more available, it is marked as closed. So there's one more question: can you close a parent if still some remaining available quantity? Yes, you can close a specimen if there is available quantity. If you see, this is the example, there is available quantity, but you can still close it. The reason might be, you utilized it, there is very less quantity remaining, you don't want to show that specimen as no more available, so you can close that. So there is one more question: if a protocol doesn't automatically close parent, can this be done at the time that specimen collect data is being entered, or do we have to go back and individually parents and then close them? Yes, you can close the specimens while collecting specimens. So if I go to say collect these specimens, so we have added this checkbox where you can close the parent. So this way you can, which means that you collect the specimens and mark the parent or the primary specimen as closed, so that it is no more available. So these were some of the questions here. So these were the topics I wanted to cover. So right on time we have finished. If you have more questions, you can contact us at help. There is manuals which are and videos on help.openspecimen.org. You can contact us on forums. Of course, you can also post your questions on support@krishnagni.com. So we'll be covering more topics in coming up webinars, like reporting, bulk operations, screen configurations using JSON. So if you have other topic recommendations, you can contact us on forums. We'll be happy to cover that. We'll share this recording, but if you have any other questions, let us know and I will be happy to answer that. Now I'll be hanging around for some time. Otherwise, thank you everyone, and stay safe. We'll see you in next sessions. Okay, so there is another question: does it keep track of the parent quantity automatically, or you must change manually? If you're making aliquots, then it does reduce the parent's quantity automatically. Suppose you made 5 aliquots of 0.5 and the parent quantity is 5, it reduces the available quantity as 2.5. But if you're making derivative, it does not reduce it automatically, because you might be creating derivative like DNA out of plasma or RNA. So we don't know how much quantity is utilized by making that derivative. So that's how the quantity is tracked. Okay. So any other questions?